A good dancer must have good physical body balance. If a dancer has poor balance, she will lack grace and rhythm and risk falling. She will inevitably develop injuries, some lasting a lifetime. Therefore, even accomplished dancers must incorporate balance exercises into their regimen. When a dancer is off balance or an artist creates a composition that is aesthetically out of balance, they appear unpleasant, dissonant, and painful to watch. Balance is important in all aspects of life. We all learn the importance of a balanced diet consisting of eating a variety of healthy foods from different food groups. It's good to have balance in an exercise regimen consisting of stretches, flexibility, cardio, coordination, and strength exercises. Mental balance is equally important, as many of us are fraught with obsessive compulsive disorders, phobias, and anxiety. Balanced views are essential for a good personality. Imbalance in beliefs makes one dogmatic, intolerant of other opinions, and argumentative. Dr. Landon Brooks observes, "A balanced view of things is a comment on fairness and even-handedness, a mental trait to be desired and valorized, as well as a form of syntax." If a dancer moves their weight in one direction, they must compensate with an equal action in the opposite direction. Similarly, if you learn only one viewpoint and are ignorant of opposing sides, you risk becoming a self-righteous fanatic, making yourself and everyone around you miserable. Balance in life is found when we simultaneously incorporate seemingly disparate concepts. Authors Ronald and V. Gilbert Beers note, "We get out of balance when we overemphasize one aspect of our responsibility at the cost of others." King Solomon, in his Book of Ecclesiastes, expounded upon balanced living and warned against being too extreme. He succinctly described balance as, "It's good to grasp the one and not let go of the other." One of the secrets to living a balanced life is to first seek to be content, for being content with one's life helps to avoid extremes. Solomon said it is good to find satisfaction in your work and to enjoy the things you do have. If you are satisfied with the lot that God has given you, you won't overly strive and lose your balance. Apparently, Solomon had a workaholic period of life during which he discovered the futility of excessive work. In the end, he determined that it is foolish to forsake relationships for the pursuit of personal achievement or financial gain. Solomon warned workaholics not to neglect friends. He wrote, "If one falls down, his friend can help him up, but pity the man who falls and has no one to help him up." If you don't have friends to share life with, there's no point in achievement. Excluding friends and other relationships for the pursuit of work, studies, or even entertainment begets a lonely, meaningless life. God made us to be close social creatures, to love one another. For if you don't have loving relationships, you'll be missing out on the whole point of life. A Christian must learn to find the balance between different spiritual issues. The Bible states, "Never be lacking in zeal." Yet Proverbs 19:2 states, "It's not good to have zeal without knowledge." It is common for young people to have much passion but lack knowledge or experience. In the Book of Acts, Saul, who would later be called Paul, zealously persecuted the church because he had an inadequate knowledge of Jesus. Paul would later write about his fellow Jews, "For I can testify about them that they are zealous for God, but their zeal is not based on knowledge." Zeal without knowledge makes for dangerous fanatics. Knowledge without purposeful zeal makes for elitist Pharisees, critical church people, or irrelevant scholars. Rather, choose to be like Jesus, who had both great zeal and knowledge. We can learn a lot about balance from Jesus. Jesus showed us how to balance being in the world, but not being of it. In fact, Jesus had to balance being both the exalted Son of God and being a humble servant. Jesus also showed us the balance between emotions and logic. He had a logical and planned ministry strategy, but his work was very much driven by his compassion. We need to practice the one without neglecting the other. Jesus lived out the balance of the world's most perplexing issues. On the cross, Jesus worked out the paradox of God's promise of both judgment and mercy. Judgment and mercy are opposites. Yet God must judge our sin as he promised, but God also wants to extend his forgiveness and mercy. Because of God's great mercy, he gave his only begotten Son, Jesus, as a sacrifice for our sins to negate the justice we brought upon ourselves. He did one without neglecting the other. King Solomon wrote, "Do not be overrighteous, neither be overwise. Why destroy yourself?" Jesus was perfectly righteous, but he wasn't overrighteous. For example, Jesus would heal people on the Sabbath, even though work was prohibited on the Sabbath, as he considered healing someone more important than keeping the letter of the law. In biblical accounts, the Jews were sometimes criticized for violating the Sabbath by trading or carrying loads for commercial business. However, the Pharisees had extended the laws as far as possible, declaring many things off limits on the Sabbath, so that no one would inadvertently violate the Sabbath. As they were concerned with the minutiae of the laws, the Pharisees once condemned Jesus for allowing his disciples to eat grains picked from a field on a Sabbath day. To defend their behavior, Jesus recounted the time when a famished David, while escaping from his enemies, was given the consecrated bread by the priests, which Jesus noted, quote, is lawful only for the priests to eat. But the priests were cruel, and so they allowed compassion to supersede the letter of the law. The Pharisees also kept themselves separate from sinners. The word Pharisee means set apart or separate. The Pharisees criticized Jesus because they felt that he was not as separate or as religious as they were. Jesus ate and drank with sinners, and he healed people on the Sabbath. This infuriated the Pharisees, for they had lost their sense of balance and perspective. The Pharisees meticulously adhered to the details of the Mosaic law, but they cared little for lost souls. Jesus observed how they had put great effort into figuring out their tithe, but they neglected care and love. Jesus told them, woe to you, Pharisees, because you give God 1/10 of your mint and rue and all kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. They couldn't balance love and justice with obedience to the works of the law. To repeat what Solomon said, it is good to grasp the one and not let go of the other. To balance his advice in being over-righteous, Solomon wrote with typical sarcasm, do not be over-wicked, and do not be a fool. Why die before your time? The other extreme of severe legalism is libertinism. A libertine is a person who behaves without moral principles or sense of responsibility, especially in sexual matters. This is common today, but it's not new. As noted earlier, Solomon fully indulged in hedonistic pursuits and found them wanting. He eventually found this lifestyle foolish, futile, and dangerous. Solomon saw that wicked behaviors are harmful enough to eventually destroy our health and kill us. But even normal practices that God has given us to enjoy may harm us if we exceed their proper use. Eating or drinking or sex are all gifts from God, but done to extremes or outside of God's prescribed context, they will ruin our lives. Extreme pursuits have the draw of freedom and fun, but outside of their prescribed context or prescribed doses, they are destructive. Solomon had learned from experience that pursuing the extremes of pleasure is a dead end. He wrote a proverb saying, if you find honey, eat just enough. Too much of it and you'll vomit. It took years of trial and error before King Solomon finally grasped the concept of balance. Balance is often discovered after a life of trial and error, but you can save yourself a lot of grief and stress if you can learn balance from other people's mistakes. In the Book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon was transparent enough to include his extreme but empty pursuits in his book, so we could learn from his lack of balance and not waste our own lives. If you can discover balance where you're young, you can live a very healthy life. With balance, you can rest in God's will, adeptly navigating the narrow path through life. You'll be more relaxed and have a more fulfilling, stress-free life with time to enjoy family and friends.